All right. So one of the terms you guys have is collective bargaining. You guys know what a labor union is? A labor union. Or a trade union? Okay. Here's how this works. All right. How is it that workers can have power over their business? Yeah.
If they like work really hard and like efficiently.
Well, yeah, it helps to make yourself inexpendable, you know. But let me put it this way: how, if we are upset with what a business is doing as workers, how can we make them do what we want them to do? What power do we have to enforce anything on them?
You pay them. Wait, you're talking about employees?
Yes, I'm talking about employees.
Like if the employees want to,
Yeah, want to get paid more.
you ask for it,
Yeah, well, they say no.
and you work harder for it.
Here's the thing: is that guarantee they're going to give it to you?
No.
That's not really any power. That's just you hoping. How can you make them do what you want?
Hire, go on strike.
Go on strike. Yes. You guys know what going on strike is? Kind of. That's part of it. Let me do it this way. Let's say you came to school tomorrow. There were no teachers here. I'm okay with this. What about if they weren't here for a week or 2 months? You say it's all well and good. Yeah, but here's the thing: is you're not going to graduate because you're not getting the class time, and they're not going to refund your money. You're going to be kind of upset, aren't you? You're not my parents, okay. This is a very, very crude example, but an example nonetheless. You guys are going to be upset because you're not getting what you paid for. Yes? That's a way of exerting power. That's going on strike. Basically, the workers say, we're done, we're not coming in. Now, here's the problem with it. There's a couple problems, actually. Problem number one. The only way that works is if everybody does it. If everybody works together. Okay? That's collective bargaining. All workers together bargaining for higher wages, better treatment, sick time, all these different types of benefits. Keep in mind how horrible factories were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. You guys have seen the pictures. So, trade unions, labor unions, were these organizations of workers who collectively bargained for better treatments. The problem, though, is there were so many workers available that if a group of workers was like, yeah, we're going to stop working, the factories were like, okay, goodbye. We'll hire somebody else. So you're talking about protests? That's the other half of it. A bunch of guys with signs upset stand outside the factory. They're just going to abuse you just like they did us and try to interfere with other workers coming in. In some cases, they might try to physically block them from coming in. So factory owners responded by shooting them, by hiring soldiers to basically kill the protesters. This resulted in riots. It resulted in political changes because it applied pressure to not only the businesses but also the politicians. Keep in mind, we had just gone through all men getting the right to vote. What was that term I gave for you for that, by the way? All men right to vote. Suffrage is the right to vote. Manhood, so what about it? It's all, so it is universal manhood suffrage. Bingo bango. So this is what we're talking about. They applied pressure. The result, we saw a lot of improvements in factories during the 19th century. Higher wages were being paid out. Now, what the effect of this is kind of interesting. Because workers are getting paid more money, they actually wanted to buy stuff. Great example of this is the car. Henry Ford used the assembly line in order to make cars cheaper. He paid his workers well enough that they could afford cars. Guess what they bought? Fords. What? And so this resulted in a car culture that really doesn't exist in many other places. This helped to further stimulate the economy because people were buying stuff, which meant that the factories had to produce more, had to hire more workers, and basically resulted in a positive feedback loop. So the quality of life began to improve. Quality of life is one of your terms. Basically what it means is it's the measurement of people's access to comforts. Standard of living could be another way we word this. Essentially, life gets better. They start benefiting from all of these industrial advances. They are healthier. We talked about medicine. Transportation has gotten better. They can get places faster. They can go on vacation. What an amazing concept that is. I'm going to go somewhere else. The average amount of distance the average person traveled for much of history is 1 mile. That's tops. That's as far as you go in life. Now I can go somewhere else. There's more money to go around. Food is better. There's more food. Children aren't dying at a young age as much. Smallpox has been eliminated. We've gotten rid of all kinds of diseases. Anthrax. We've gotten rid of rabies to some extent. It's not as deadly, at least. Hospitals are cleaner. Everything is getting better, so standard of living improves. Now we're starting to feel the benefits of an industrial society. That still is going to be a lot of changes in terms of philosophy, though. Which brings us to the next point, pretty wonderfully. Economics. Ooh, big excitement. Okay, here's the things you need to know. Laissez-faire, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, Thomas Malthus, David Ricardo, what they thought. So let's break it down. What is laissez-faire? You guys remember this? We talked about this a long time ago. No. Okay. It's an economic principle that means hands-off. Basically, it's talking about should the government interfere with the economy. Adam Smith wrote in his book, The Wealth of Nations, no. His belief was that the market will determine whether something fails or succeeds. We don't have to deal with it. We will pay people more if they deserve it. Basically, it's about marketability. Keep in mind, people who have skills, who have training, get paid more than people who don't. That's because they are more valuable. It's called human capital. Furthermore, whether a business produces something will be determined whether people will buy it. The government doesn't need to go tell a business, yeah, you need to produce this much, because if they produce too much, they lose money. If they produce too little, they lose money, or potential money. It's called opportunity cost. So the whole idea is just leave it alone, it'll be fine. Now, here's the heart of it. It's competition. Businesses will compete with one another to try to get you to buy their stuff. What can a business do to make you want to buy their things? Advertisement, sure. That's getting the word out. Yeah, buy one, get one free certainly does that, right? Why do you like the things you do? Let's talk soda for a second. Favorite soda, why? Tastes good. Okay, fair enough. It's better quality product, we might say. Why do people buy certain cars for more money? Maybe something like that. Might be because it's fast. It's pretty. Might also be something though like it's good engineering. You know what I mean? There are certain cars that keep their value better than others. If, for instance, you try to sell a used Honda, you're probably going to get a little bit more money than, say, for a used Kia. Because Kias are not known for their quality. Hondas are. What else? What else determines whether we buy something? You're so interested in saying how it looks.
How cheap it is.
That absolutely that plays in effect. How cheap something is. But think about this. Have you ever bought something because it's the name brand? Brand recognition. That's definitely a thing. So there's all these different factors that can influence it, right? Generally speaking, quality and price are the things that most people fight over. Because, putting it on a name that's kind of hard. Name usually represents one of the two things. So basically it comes down to quality versus price. You know, now all things, if we leave it alone, we'll buy the thing that's cheapest if the quality is the same. Like, you probably don't care what name brand of paper towels you buy. It's a paper towel, who cares? It's going to be the same thing, right? But when it comes to, say, a tablet device, I see a lot of iPads out here. Why iPad versus, say, something else? Right? But also, are they quality products? Yeah, they are. Absolutely they are. So there's a lot of things that kind of incentivize you to buy things, okay? So that's the market in action. Someone, in order to get you to buy, say, a Lenovo, they might be able to do it, but how much cheaper do they have to be for you to go, like, I'll take that, you know what I'm saying? You're willing to buy a non-name brand thing, a generic thing, if it's cheap enough. See what I'm saying? Not all the time. If it's something like, oh, this is an investment, you probably pay more just because of the long run sort of viewpoints. But this is something to consider. Now, what throws a monkey wrench into this whole plan is monopolies. You guys know what monopoly is? Not the game, but what a monopoly is. Monopoly is where you control every aspect of a business. So, for instance, there's a guy named Andrew Carnegie. We often pronounce his name Carnegie. You ever heard of Carnegie Hall, Carnegie Mellon University, all these places? No? Okay, he was a business in America. He was actually an Irish immigrant. And, wait, no he wasn't. He was, I forget where he was from. Anyway, unimportant. What he was poor. And he ended up making something of himself in the steel industry. By the end of his business career, he controlled everything that involved steel in the entire United States. If you wanted to build something, you were buying it from Carnegie. He put all of his competitors out of business. That meant he could basically rip people off. He could charge an insane amount of money and not really improve the quality, because if you wanted iron or steel, you had to get it from him. Great example of this. Let's talk internet connections for just a second here in the United States. Download speed. You know what the average household in the U.S. gets for download speed? That has high-speed internet access. About 5 megabytes per second. They say 10, but that's not true. If you actually test it, it's less than that. About 5 megabytes per second. You guys know what the average household pays for high-speed internet access in the United States? It's around $50 to $60 per month. Okay, let's talk Korea, for instance. You guys know what the average download speed in South Korea is? I think it's 85 or 90 megabytes per second. You guys know how much they pay? About $10 a month. Yes.
Why can't we like negotiate?
Because we could do that.
Wait.
But here's the thing: is how many options does the average American household have for high-speed internet access? How many companies can they buy it from? Let's talk Jeffersonville, Indiana. You have one, which is Time Warner. If you want high speed, you gotta. Otherwise, you have to use dial-up. That's a monopoly. And by the way, the Supreme Court is right now hashing out whether or not this is actually a monopoly or not. Time Warner says no, it's not, because you can get dial-up. It's a choice. But there's a lot of folks saying that's not a choice. That's like saying, oh, you don't have to have a car, you can ride a bike. You subsidize gas in the United States. You don't subsidize internet access. So there's this debate going on whether or not it should be rated as a utility. If that's the case, the price is going to shoot down and quality is going to shoot up. So this is a modern example of monopoly, and it throws this whole idea out of working. Does that make sense? So Smith was saying that leave it alone will be fine. And basically, if you do leave it alone, it'll be fine. The problem is that while the government might not be interfering, businesses will, and they'll use whatever means they can to basically squash competition. It's just natural for them to do so. So two other writers, Thomas Malthus and David Ricardo, both of these folks talk about government interfering in business. Both of them were against it. Malthus did say, though, that food was not one of these things. The problem was there wasn't enough food. Basically, food should not be exempt from this type of thing. He actually specifically blamed lack of food as one of the major problems of the Industrial Revolution. Dave Ricardo actually took that one step forward and said the problem isn't so much there's not enough kids, there's too many kids. People should stop having children. And one of the things you're going to see in the industrial age, that does happen. Consider this, what's the average family size in the United States right now? How many kids? 2.5. It's not actually that way. Remember, we're talking about averages. So you might have one family having 6 kids, another has like 5, 3 or 2, It's the average it out. It's like the same reason why the average family household has a third of a cat. It's not really they chop the cat in half and they're sharing. It's like the averages. Some people don't like cats. Some people have friends. I don't know. But here's the thing is, I'm sorry, I'm distracted by Brian's term. I forgot what I was going to say. But here's the thing is that the reason for that, if you compare to, say, 3 generations ago, okay? Heck, my parents, my mom was one of 6. Her dad was one of 15. This was what was the average thing. Because more kids equals more labor for farms. In the industrial age, more kids means more mouths to feed. Those are why you go work in the factory, go out there. This is why a lot of kids join the Navy. If you're a young man of poor means, go sail the world. They'll take care of you. You make some money, and you might be able to get a career out of it. Of course, you might also be maimed, but hey, things just happen, right? So this is the things that are kind of going on. Hello. It did happen. Another philosophy that evolves in this area is utilitarianism. Now, let's talk economic concepts again. Economics tries to apply mathematics to a lot of common sense thought processes, but one of the things that kind of is difficult to quantify is emotion or benefits. Utility is an economics term that means good. Roughly, it's good. How much good something does. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill came up with this idea. And basically, you would try to quantify the amount of good some action would cause, and then measure it. Will this action be better, or will this action be better? Whichever action does the most good, that's what we do. To put this into an analytical standpoint, have you guys ever made a pro-con list? Like, I want this item. Pro, you write it in. Con, write it in. And then you basically add up how many pros versus how many cons, and whichever side has the most wins. That's utilitarianism in a nutshell. Now, the effects of this. They propose that the government should step in and help factory workers against the owners because it will actually benefit society more. Remember, this isn't just morality. We're not talking about it's the nice thing to do. Actually, we didn't talk about the emotions. This is one of the logical fallacies people love to fall into. It's this idea that, it's the right thing to do. The problem is that that's subjective. Furthermore, people don't really care. It's like, I know it's the right thing because people feed, not starving, but who cares? Or, yes, but should people have to work for it, or any number of different arguments for it? This is showing that by helping people out, the government will actually benefit. There's higher tax rates. More healthy population means more work's getting done and increases productivity. Yes? Please. Don't forget to sign out. So there's all these issues that can arise from it and are benefited by utilitarianism. We good on this? All right. I will give you 10 seconds. You don't have to write every single word, just get the gist of it. You guys need to know, started by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, basically what utilitarianism is. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Don't forget, there's also the YouTube video if you need to catch that later. All right. So we're going to talk socialism versus communism. All right. These are two concepts that came out of the same era. They are different. They're similar, but they're different. The basic idea is this. In socialism, all of the means of production, instead of being owned by the individuals, will be owned by everyone. Here's the problem. Socialists say the reason that there is poverty, that there is disease, that there is injustice, we'll say, exists is because the majority of resources are owned by a minority of people. If everyone has equal access to all resources, you won't have these things. In fact, they take it one step further. You can look at crime. And so the reason there's so much crime is because of inequality. If you have people being paid, if you have people all equal, then there's no need for crime. I mean, to some extent, it's true philosophy. Consider this. Most people who are involved in illegal activity, who steal, why do they steal? They don't have the money. Usually where they find them. Not that it's drugs. It's one of the number one causes for people going to prison nowadays. But it's not the only reason. You're right. Sometimes it's just because, hey, they don't have it. So they take it. So, if everybody is basically given an income, all their needs taken care of, why are they being to do that? One of the principal problems with this philosophy, though, is incentive. Consider this. If you were going to get paid a livable wage, all your food is taken care of, your rent, medical care, you basically don't have to worry about any money at all, and you didn't have to work, would you? That's what some folks say. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I know a lot of people, they would go stark raving mad sitting in their house eating potato chips all day long, Not just bad, but, this is something that is debatable, It is definitely a problem with socialism. That's why you'll never really see pure socialism. What you have instead is governments that are capitalists with socialist tendencies. For instance, we have some socialist tendencies in the United States. We're not socialists by any shape, but we do have socialist tendencies. What would be something that's socialist that we do? Any ideas? Something we take care of folks with. Yeah, that would be kind of an example. Not exactly, because you still pay for it. A greater example would be like Canada's socialized medicine, basically taxes pay for medicine. That would be socialism. But it's right, though, because it's kind of a socialist tendency. Sort of like welfare, or Medicare, or Social Security, or any other different government programs. If we didn't have any of those, we'd be pure capitalism. The problem is, as we've seen, that doesn't work either. Because basically, if you have ruthless capitalism, we had what happened in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and that leads to revolution. Remember, I had a question on the board yesterday. I don't know if you guys actually looked at it too much. The question I had was, what stopped revolutions from happening? Okay? Social welfare programs are a big part of that. There's more, though. But anyways, the means of production. That basically is anything that has economic value to produce wealth. So it can be a factory, it can be a mine, it can be a ship, it can be anything that has economic value. So the idea here is that we all jointly own all property. Sort of like certain Native American tribes. Probably the closest thing you guys experience to true socialism is your family. Not all families are like that, but most families like everyone gets to share pretty much everything in the house. They get to equally use whatever's in there, things like that. And generally, you can see socialism work on a small scale, but on a big scale, it tends to not work so well. Now, communism's a little different. Communism was started by a guy named Karl Marx, also Friedrich Engels. These two guys were German philosophers, and they saw the root of all problems not as the means of production, but because of class struggle. Basically, you have different social classes, and they're constantly going to be at each other's throats. Actually, there's some truth to that. During his lifetime, there were three main social classes: the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, and the nobility. Proletariat basically means working class. That's one of your terms you need to know. Proletariat's working class. Bourgeoisie we had back in the French Revolution. Does anyone remember what that is? It's middle class. These are the factory owners and that sort of thing. The third is the nobility. Basically, the workers do not like the middle class because of all the abuses they face in their places of employment, the factories. Not to mention they see them as being immoral, money-grabbing bad people. The middle class looks down on the workers as being lazy and sees the nobles as having privileges that they don't deserve. Basically, why should they just be born with certain privileges, like being able to be put into the House of Lords? The nobles look down on the workers as basically being wretches, and they look down on the middle class as basically being immoral and not having a sense of duty like nobles. Of course, that's kind of crap. We've seen that before. But this is kind of the attitude that they're supposed to help out the workers, and the middle class won't do that. So basically, everyone dislikes everybody else. The thing where Marx had it wrong was he expected for there to be an international workers' revolution. International because it would be everybody across borders, specifically workers. The lowest class would rise up across international boundaries and crush the middle class. And what happens then? They would establish a workers' paradise where everybody was equal, where there was no class. Classes would be abolished. That never has happened, not once. The problem is always the transition. Give me the revolution is fine, that's easy. But what about transitioning to a new level of society where there's no classes? Have you guys ever read the book Animal Farm? Okay. If you guys are unfamiliar with this book, basically the premise is a little silly. It's a bunch of farm animals decide to revolt against the farmers, kick all the humans off the farm, and they're going to work for themselves. Except the thing is the pigs are smarter than all the other animals, so they start kind of changing the rules so they become basically the farmers at the end of the book. They're living in the farmer's house and doing all this stuff, and so yeah, right? It's basically an allegory to communist revolution, which what happened in the Soviet Union. It didn't work because there was never like a transfer of power. It's like, okay, now we have a revolution, this new class takes over, we have essentially a dictatorship, a totalitarian state established. So it never actually worked. There's never been a true communist state. There's been a lot of attempts, but it never actually quite works out how Marx actually thought. Which brings us to the point: why not? Why was there never an international workers revolution? That's Karl Marx. He probably has the best beard in the world. Very, very square, very chiseled, And like I said, he and his partner, Frederick Engels, wrote the Communist Manifesto, sort of the handbook of communism. But this was why it never happened. Number one, what's that funny little word that means everyone's really proud of their culture and their background?
Nationalism.
Yeah, people do not side with each other because of we're all workers. They side with each other because nationalism, yes, it's us versus them, We just want them to die, It's not lands for us. It's nationalism that's sweeping through Europe, which is ultimately going to culminate in World War I. Secondly, there was a lot of reforms going on, which was making life easier on the working class. Remember we talked about social welfare programs like Otto von Bismarck put into this. We've got all these other changes going on. Not to mention, our third point, a lot of the pressures that were plaguing the early stages began to wane. So, for instance, urban renewal. People weren't living in kind of little tenements anymore. They were starting to be able to be in nice housing, and medical care was getting better, so they weren't as sick. Life got better in a nutshell. So these pressures never really boiled over into full-fledged revolutions, not everywhere. And so this whole idea never kind of went anywhere. We got it? Oh, no, right. I'm just saying. To diminish. Let me ask you a question, because this is an important question. Folks really kind of struggle with this. What's the difference between communism and socialism? That is one of the hardest things to nail down. People tend not to focus on. Okay. The basic difference is that in communism, the focus is on class struggle. The main difference is that the classes will never get along together. And socialism, everybody benefits equally, so there really is no class. Or if there is, no one really cares. Socialism is sort of like this ideal society that never really quite pans out. Communism is sort of like an application of that to the 19th century. like I said, communism is sort of it is a form of socialism, but it's really kind of specific to this political ideology that's going on in the 20th century, well, early 20th century, late 19th century. So that's the main difference. Okay. So, quiz tomorrow. What can you expect to be on there? Basically, I want you to know things with proper names, terms, that sort of thing. So if I scroll back to the very beginning of this slideshow, you'll see the terms to know. Oop, of course it did that. Terms to know. Urbanization, tenements, labor unions, utilitarianism, socialism, means of production, communism, proletariat. Know all of those. Okay? Also, as we scroll down, it would be helpful to know Luddites. You actually read a primary source document on that. Don't worry about Peterloo Massacre. Methodism, you should know that. Yeah, pretty much that's the main thing I want you to know. And then, yeah, the rest of this just explains those other terms. So that's all you need for that section. The only other section I'm going to ask you guys to know anything about is this one. This is section 2. So it's chapter 9, section 2 and 3 on the quiz. So here's your terms. You need to know all those: germ theory, urban renewal, mutual aid societies, standard of living, as well as these folks, Louis Pasteur, Florence Nightingale, and Joseph Lister. That just explains all that. Yeah, it's just talking about urban renewal. Again, one of those terms you guys have. So that's it. Those terms plus those people. What's that? What's that? That's only 10 questions on that? They're on YouTube. Yeah, they always are. They always have been, always will be. Unless I make a mistake and forget to record, but she always reminds me, so we haven't done that for a long time. She's got my back for it. So, all of them are on there. And so you guys can go back and watch this, and then you'll know exactly what to study for tonight, so you can just find tomorrow. We good on this?
What is proletariat?
The proletariat is the working class. It's just a term meaning working class. So we have proletariat, bourgeoisie, and nobles.
What's urbanization?
Urbanization is the massive development of cities. Basically what happens is the second agricultural revolution occurred, forcing a lot of people to try to find jobs in the cities because they were kicked off their farms. And that meant that cities had to rapidly expand. So remember how I showed you guys that picture? In fact, it's down here. I showed all these folks living on the streets, and then we made this allegory to modern day developing nations or abundant industrialization. That's the effects of urbanization. Until urban renewal happens, and we start developing these cities, building better sewer systems, better houses, all this great stuff. Yeah. Anything else?
Did you say what
Tenements are apartment buildings. Specifically, they're kind of like the ghetto. They're run down, that sort of thing.
means of production?
Means of production are businesses, specifically factories, mines, things like that. Know how that relates to socialism as well. Specifically, that socialists say if we all own this equally, everyone's benefiting equally, there's no need for people to have wars or upset. It's everyone just benefits everyone. Everyone's taken care of, essentially.
The communism is the for people.
Mass struggle.
Yeah.
Yes. To put it another way, modern day, another idea about socialism is basic income. I think we talked about that a while ago. The idea that everybody in the United States gets paid a certain amount of money, and that would cover their basic needs, so that if you wanted more, you could go get a job that otherwise you're taken care of. That's socialism. Labor unions are organizations of workers. Now, they tend to be revolved around one specific craft. So, for instance, there's an auto workers union, there's a plumbers union, an electricians union, all these different unions. There's a teachers union, and basically they work to, they use collective bargaining to get what they want.
What are tenements?
Those are basically what I saw over here, these run-down apartment buildings.
What's like the basic definition of utilitarian?
Utilitarianism, measuring the good of actions. How much good an action will do, I guess you could say.
Sorry, I wasn't here on Tuesday.
Well, we just covered that like a little bit. I get what you're saying. Okay, we good? Any questions? Does anyone have any scores to change on the scoreboard?
Yeah.
You do? What's it? What? Yeah, you're waiting at the very last second. Does it beat one of mine? Does it beat one of mine? All right, I'll stop that. The